Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the January Cabinet BCP Council. Most of us have only been 10 hours since we last saw each other, as we didn't finish council until midnight. And I want to thank all of the officers for being here bright and breezy, having also sat through until midnight. So it's a busy old week, having done scrutiny on Monday and audit tomorrow. Don't know who scheduled that one. So we have a very busy agenda today. We are scheduled to be here until about 12:45, but I am slightly concerned we'll get through it all. We'll just have to give it a go. So agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I am aware that Councillor David Brown will be arriving late because he's attending the public drop-in at the Moordown Plus Day Centre this morning, so he's probably expected for about 11 o'clock, but he will be here. I think everybody else is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, we're all here, so that's good. Agenda item 2, declarations of. Oh, I haven't done housekeeping. Sarah's poised. Look at that. I shall pause and we will pass to Sarah for the housekeeping.
Thank you, Leader. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Leader. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and mute or turn off your microphone when you're not talking. If you are accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please indicate by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds again, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Braidley Road, under the flyover, or in the surface car park at the front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So back to the agenda. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations they need to refer to? If they come up with any during the meeting, if you could just make us aware. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes. So we need to confirm and sign them as a true record. Do we have somebody to move that they are a true record?
Happy to propose them.
Thank you. And second, Councillor Cox. Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, public issues. So we have 3 public questions, and I believe we have a statement which has just been handed to Democratic Services as it seemed to arrive right on the deadline, but it's fine. We're going to accept that. So if I can ask the first questioner, Mr. Schroeder, would you like to come up first to the table, turn on your microphone, ask a question, and we'll give you your response.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing us to bring our question. My name is Peter Schroeder, and for your information, I am currently the chairman of the Branksome Park and Council Cliffs Residents Association, which is somewhat relevant to the question. My question is this: in what way does the council think that reducing available parking by the planned sell-off will improve either the quality of life or the economic well-being of the residents of Poole?
Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. Could you turn your microphone off, but do stay there to hear your response. Thank you for your question, which relates to the loss of parking and the associated impact on quality of life. This car park has been underused for many years, and even in the peak summer months, people avoid using this car park and instead choose to park on residential roads or in illegal and dangerous places. The previous borough of Poole established that it was not good value for money to retain this car park and agreed its sale, and not good value for the taxpayers of Poole and now BCP, and that it would be better served in reallocating part of this site and creating new homes here instead. The sale of part of the site will also allow the remaining car park to be modernised so that the spaces are suitable for those who need it, and the assessment shows that the overall change in the number of spaces will be adequate to meet the needs. We are separately looking at the issues faced by residents on local roads like Lakeside Road, who are negatively impacted by thoughtless drivers blocking their access, behaving in an unruly manner late at night, and we believe that supporting their calls for on-street parking measures will improve their quality of life. The economic value of new homes paying council tax and spending money in the local economy will more than outweigh the relatively low income from the car parking, as is demonstrated in the report, which you'll hear about later. Furthermore, the building of new homes will generate developer contributions that will support community infrastructure and affordable housing for the wider area. Thank you. You're welcome. And the next question we have is from Roy Pointer. Which is on the same item. So, Mr. Pointer, if you'd like to go ahead.
Morning, Leader. Morning, members. My question relates obviously to item 11 on your agenda. The sale of the south portion of Beach Road car park identifies the need for a business case for the upgrade retention of the remainder. This business case could fail if considered in isolation. Can the council assure residents that the potential for the whole site be considered and appraised as one project, linking the case for the part sale with the upgrade of the remainder, thereby avoiding the latter being unviable due to the sale of the former? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. The business case for delivery of improvements in the rear car park is being expedited. Funding will be met through PWLB, Public Works Loan Board, borrowings, and access arrangements will be resolved prior to the completion of any sale. There is therefore no need to link the two projects. Expediting a sale will ensure an early capital receipt for the council, which in turn will help our efforts to fund the council's transformation programme and improvements to the parking area, including better signage to ensure drivers can locate it, therefore ensuring that the new car park has better usage. And finally, we have Mr. Sprackling.
Good morning. My name is John Sprackling, a member of the Branksome Park Camford Bliss Residents Association. The report at paragraph 11 identifies the potential need for more on-street metered parking in order to support parking needs due to the reduced size of the car park. The high cost of meter installation is unlikely to be recouped by charges, since drivers simply park in other roads, leading to both local opposition and low meter usage. Is the council aware that there was significant opposition to extend on-road parking at a public meeting in 2016, which was attended by the current Director of Infrastructure in his former role as Head of Transportation, and the opposition is unlikely to change should more on-road parking be contemplated as any part of this project?
Thank you, Mr. Sprackling. Would you mind turning off your microphone?
Sorry.
Thank you. The business case for the rear car park will address the need, if any, for additional on-street pay and display in nearby roads, and the latter would, of course, require further public consultation with all feedback given full consideration. I have been lobbied very heavily, actually over at least a year, by local residents who are welcoming on-street parking meters and have been campaigning themselves to have restrictions in their roads. We would not rely on information gathered 8 years ago to test the feelings of those most directly affected and negatively impacted by thoughtless parking. Elsewhere, evidence suggests that the cost of installing metered or other restricted parking, such as resident zones, would be recouped within about 2 years. I think we then have a statement, which is from Ms. Moss. Now, we don't respond to statements, so but it may be that during the discussion you might find your your comments are referred to, but there's no commitment. And I should also add, we didn't have sight of this until a moment ago, so none of us will have been able to reflect on it in advance.
Good morning. I'm Vicky Moss from the Branksome Park and Camphor Cliffs Residents Association. No more developments are needed in this area. There are blocks of apartments in the area close to the beach with over 25% second homes and used for only 4 weeks of the year. These developments are underutilised. BH13 has the largest proportion of second homes in BCP, with 13% of dwellings used as second homes and empty much of the year. Since the arrival of rock water at Branksome Beach, there's been an influx of visitors and the car parking is frequently inadequate. I see cars regularly turning away because Beach Road car park is shut. This is currently losing the Revenue Council. There's also frequent flooding within 100 metres of this site at the entrance to Beach Road car park, and drainage is a major issue along the length of Branksome Chine. Please preserve Beach Road car park for public use as a car park, and don't more people have the right to have a day at the beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Moss. So as you say, that is item 11 on the agenda, so it may be some time before we get to there, but we will be dealing with those issues later on. So that brings us to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the overview and scrutiny committees. I can see that we have Councillor Steve Bartlett, chair of the overview and scrutiny board, online. Just trying to recall whether we had specific recommendations from Monday. I think we had, we didn't, did we? But do you have anything that you want to raise that for items that are not on the cabinet agenda that have come up through the overview and scrutiny committees at this point?
No, Leader, thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to you, as is traditional, when we go through things. And just for those members of the public, the process that we follow is that we introduce an item. We then go to the chair of scrutiny if he has anything to add, ward councillors if they are online with us or in the room, other members of council for their comments before we move to a debate among the cabinet, so that we can make sure we fully take into account the views of people who are not in cabinet when we make a decision. So just for clarity about the order of things. That takes us on to the main items of business. So the first item is item 6, which is the council tax base for 24-25, which I believe is going to be introduced by Councillor Mike Cox. Do you have a seconder, Mike? Oh, we did, but he's not here. Would somebody like to second this one? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Over to you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is a very technical paper, and despite the fact that not many people give it too much attention, there's an awful lot of work goes into preparing this by the finance team. It basically brings together a calculation of the council taxpayers of BCP and is set out in the paper. The only thing I would say about it is that there does seem to be an awful lot of households which is applying a discount, and that we will be looking specifically at this to make sure that those that are applying for a discount are entitled to a discount. And that's all I would like to say about it. I recommend that we approve the report of the calculation of the council tax base for 24-25.
Thank you. So do we have any councillors not on cabinet? I can see we have Councillor Canavan, Boscombe councillor, and Councillor Bartlett, who's the chair of overview and scrutiny board, online. We don't have any councillors in the room. Can't see either of them indicating to speak. Anyone on cabinet wish to speak on it? If not, I have a couple of questions. Sorry. So yes, section 151 officer, you might want to get ready. Whilst other people are thinking, I've got two questions. Oh, a statement first of all, and a question. The first is just for clarity, in paragraph Paragraph 6, just to confirm that we did ratify last night the agreement that we will be charging 200% council tax on second homes and changing the rules around what constitutes an empty home so that they get the discount for a shorter period of time. And just for clarity, for those who don't know how the system works, is we have to give 12 months notice under the Levelling Up Act of that. So therefore that won't take effect for the tax year that starts in April 24. It will start in April 25. And those assumptions have been baked into the future budget. So we're very, very aware of the problem of second homes across the area, and many councils are now taking advantage of the right to charge increased council tax in recognition of that. The question that I had, what was my question? Oh gosh, I can't remember what my question was. That's terrible, isn't it?
Well, while you're thinking of the question,
it was a question for Adam.
I would like to, as you've made a statement about the second homes, I'll make a statement about the second homes. Insofar as I don't necessarily agree with this, because I think there will be unintended consequences. I listened to the lady that made the statement, and the problems with second homes. I think there's also advantages with second homes insofar as there's less people around. But there will be unintended consequences of this, which I don't understand what they will be, and none of us understand what they will be, but there will be, and therefore I'm reluctant with this measure. But it's a measure which will increase the income for BCP, and therefore I am supporting it.
Thank you. I've remembered what my question was, Adam, and then I'm going to come on to Councillor Hadley, Councillor Martin. My question was around risk. I am aware of a situation at the moment where a significant number of council taxpayers in an area are challenging that they should have been paying council tax. And I don't want to get into the details of a specific case, but do we have, how do we factor in the risk of people who challenge their council tax band? Because it does happen. You do hear about it fairly regularly, and I'm wondering whether, on balance, there are as many go one way as the other way, or whether there is actually any set aside reserve that takes account of the risk of us suddenly having to pay back a whole load of council tax that's been overpaid by residents because they've been in the wrong council tax band.
So, Leader, thank you for the question. Two elements to that, in the sense that within the overall tax base calculation, there is reference to the rate of collection, the actual amount that we collect as a percentage of the overall amount we bill. Now, within that amount, it takes account of historic information, trend analysis, because, as you say, the challenge that you are aware of is probably not a new one, probably one we faced in previous years. So one assumes it will be taken account of in that overall collection, not being 100%, but being slightly less than 100%, because we assume not all of it will be collected. With regards to the risk for the budget, however, that's slightly different in the sense that once we agree an amount that will be collected and supporting the budget by way of council tax, that's hard coded in. That's the amount we assume. And that, if you like, then feeds into the collection fund account, because in there you've got the amount being drawn down to support the budget, which is fixed. In that account, you've got the amount we're actually being collected, and then any difference in that by way of a surplus or deficit is then taken account of in the following year's budget process. So that's why every year, at around about this time, you find that with regards to the budget process, we either introduce a problem, i.e. a deficit on the collection fund or a surplus on the collection fund, based on how well we've been doing at collecting the amount that we assume as part of the budget process. So that's how the mechanism works. Hopefully that helps.
That does help, thank you. And looking at the numbers, it's over a third of properties that are getting us what a 25% discount, which effectively a single person discount. That does feel very unlikely that a third of the homes are occupied by a single person, despite our aging population. So I'd be really interested to know what we're doing to a bit more detail about how we challenge that, because that does feel quite out of kilter.
Just to be clear, when it comes to the budget process for 24-25, we are making assumptions that that the amount of discounts that we will reduce because of a level of investment we're putting into an income maximisation team to try and actually ensure that nobody is claiming that 25% discount erroneously, if I can put it that way. So there'll be a lot of time and effort going into processes to make sure that as robust as possible as we can get it going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. I was just going to respond actually to Councillor Cox's point about second homes and empty homes, and I think aside from the income that the council might get from it, I do welcome this. As Ms Moss referenced in her area of the town, 13% of dwellings are second homes, and that means they're often standing empty. So it's the same as an empty home. And we have a housing crisis, and we have people who can't afford places to live, and also those empty houses, whether they're holiday homes that are not being used or just vacant, are not. There aren't people contributing to the area, so it creates ghettos of places which are not actively part of our community. So I think it does hopefully give people an opportunity to reflect on whether they really need to keep an empty property or whether that it's good use of the space that we have. So I welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Just to echo the points just made by Councillor Hadley, I have every sympathy with Ms Moss and the residents in Branksome. I don't know what the figure in my own ward of Highcliffe is in terms of how many second homes, but there are an awful lot. It may be nearly 13%. All the new properties, that particularly the blocks, the apartment blocks that are being built, they are all quite obviously overwhelmingly for second homes. So I think that's a massive problem there. So sympathise with that. I'd just like to ask, and forgive me if this figure is in the report, I couldn't see it, but how much income are we expecting to generate from the second homes for this 200%? And also, how many properties do we assess there to be in the BCP area that will come into this category? If you can help me with that, Mike.
Microphone, please, Councillor Cox.
Sorry. I think if you look at the schedule on page 26, it does actually show you the premium that will be charged. I think I can't immediately see it now, but I think it's like 130. But I understood it was in the region of about 5 or 6 million. Yeah, that we intend to do.
That's 5 or 6 million per year going forward, which could make quite a substantial. That's the equivalent of about 2.5% council tax on everybody.
That is the assumption. I believe there will be unintended consequences which may well reduce that, but we'll see. However, what I would say is that I think on the basis that this is being brought in for to alleviate homelessness, that money should be allocated directly to homelessness. That's my personal opinion. But we can't afford it, so.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I'm sure Councillor Wilson will talk about the great work that is being done to invest huge amounts of money in homelessness across lots and lots of projects. Does anybody else want to speak on this one, or are we happy to move on and note? This is a note, isn't it? Approve it and go forward based upon the tax base of there being 146,342 properties that are paying council tax in BCP.
It's a recommendation to council.
Thank you. So this recommendation to council, which then forms part of the February budget setting. But obviously we need this in order to be able to know what numbers are there for the budget.
It will do, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That takes us on to the next agenda item, which is the corporate performance report for Q2, which I will be proposing. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. So this paper went to scrutiny on Monday, and it is looking at the performance of the council against the indicators that had been set under the previous corporate strategy in 2019 and the revised delivery plans that were set in February 2022. So in one respect, it's fairly out of date. It's a backward-looking report, but it does give us the opportunity to look at where there are issues in certain departments, where there are problems. There are exception reports, and I think just pay credit to the officers who've actually worked really hard on improving those exception reports so that we've got a really clear route to improve, showing what's going to be different. Just so you're aware, if you weren't actually at the meeting on Monday, the new corporate strategy, which was adopted last night, will have new delivery plans, which will be coming to Cabinet in April, so that when we start the new financial year, we'll have a new set of delivery plans and targets. And one of the things which scrutiny were quite clear on Monday, and I absolutely agree with them, was the need for these targets to be smart targets. It's very easy to say, are we on track for for our improved recycling rates, but unless we have a target, we don't know whether that's really been achieved. So I know that Isla and the team in policy will be making sure that they are much more effective targets. The other thing to note is that we also provide an update on the response to the best value notice, which was given to the council in the summer following the issues under the previous administration. We expect the best value notice to remain in place for about a year, and I'm really, really pleased. If you look at the response to that, quite a lot of the matters in that are complete. Most of them are making good progress. The only ones that are amber on there are typically ones around the governance of companies, which we're coming on to later, and also ones that are under the remit of the monitoring officer. And of course, Jamie Berry, the monitoring officer, was only formally approved last night. So I think we need to give her a little bit of time to actually get that work done. But having started just before Christmas, that's going to take a few months to feed through. So I commend this policy and happy to take any questions. So, Councillor Bartlett, can I invite you first to tell us if there's specifics? I know one of the members was very concerned about the lack of a carbon measurement under the plan, and I've already raised that obviously we have the climate plan coming in March, but we're also looking at how we can have that as a measure on here. But apart from that, I'm trying to recall any specifics.
No, I think the main issue was the one regarding smart targets, Leader. The other thing I would say is that it just generally, I think there was that the committee was very pleased about the progress made regarding the best value notice. And of course, we understand there's a new corporate plan coming, which will follow the new strategy that has been published. But from a personal perspective, it would be nice to make sure that we don't lose sight of some of the existing items on the current plan, because there are some very, very meaty issues in there, and I hope we won't lose sight of them when the new plan emerges in due course. I think that's all I need to say. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I would stress again that some of the measures that we're measured on are externally measured. Some are, so they will have to continue. Some are measures that we've chosen to report on. And as I said on Monday night, if there are measures that individual councillors feel that we should be making sure we don't lose them, rather than wait until it inevitably comes to scrutiny, it would be great to hear in the meantime, so we can make sure we get ahead of the game. So I encourage you, just drop me an email or Isla, and we can make sure that if that's at least considered, and if it isn't going to be retained, actually we understand why it's not going to be retained. Because I agree with you, we shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are lots of things in the new corporate strategy that are followed across from both the original strategy and also some amendments that were made under the previous administration. So it's absolutely not a fresh start. It's an evolution, not a revolution, I think. Okay, there's nobody else showing on screen. So Cabinet, any comments on the corporate performance report? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on page 40 of the report and the issues around and those who are rough sleeping, but also the percentage of eligible households with children where homelessness was prevented within 56 days. These are areas where we have been struggling. So when this report was formulated, hopefully when the next iteration of this comes out, we'll have seen some better results with the opening of temporary accommodation at Herbert Avenue, but also some of the acquisitions we're doing. But I think it kind of leads back to the last item on the tax for second homes and trying to get empty properties back into use. You know, these are places where families could be living, you know, children will be able to do their homework, parents can cook a meal. So, you know, those figures are really, really difficult to live with. So hopefully we'll see an increase in them in the future. Going on to the rough sleeping and the latest street count, I actually think that target is a very difficult target to achieve in the current climate. So I think even if we made significant progress on it, it would still probably find itself being red or amber, because it is just where we find ourselves at the minute. So I think, yeah, that's what I have to really say on the issue. But there's a lot of work going on, and we're doing well, to be honest, to not see an overall increase in the number of people rough sleeping. This has kind of been a pretty consistent trend, this number. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I suppose I've got a question. Sorry, Isla, can I ask a question about why we're reviewing the Q2 when we're just starting Q4? Because it's I find it frustrating, and I'm sure others do when they read the reports, that we're almost not really allowed to talk about the stuff that has been done in the last 3 or 4 months. We're only allowed to really talk about the stuff that was done in the previous 3 or 4 months, which means we can't celebrate the great things like the opening of the Herbert Avenue. And I just wonder whether it's the nature of the way we target and there's not enough of a dashboard, or whether we're just never going to get any closer.
I think it's a bit of both. We are working on a dashboard which is more intuitive and something that can be updated by services themselves rather than having to send something around in quite a long process. So our ambition is absolutely to have something that is both quicker, but also that you could dig down deeper into the data behind the report as well. So that's our ambition for the next corporate strategy and the performance reporting around it. So bear with us and watch the space, I think is what I say.
Thank you, Isla. Anybody else want to make any comments? So I know there are quite a few of the exceptions relate to children's, but that's separately scrutinised at children's and had a very robust scrutiny last week. So there's any reason to go into that again. So, Councillor Cox.
I was just going to add on that is I think I reported last night that I did go to a conference yesterday on finance with the LGA, where the senior civil servant was reporting on what we can do about DSG grant and what the likely long-term consequences will be. And I did put it to him directly, what was going to happen if we didn't get the waiver, because that is fundamental to whether we get a Section 114 notice or not. And that was clearly very taking a lot of people's attention in the room. And he was very clear that in his opinion, and this was his opinion because he's only a civil servant, not a politician, that there would have to be a waiver unless there was a solution, unless the government came up with a solution. And that was his clear advice, which I thought was quite interesting, that he was being that blunt about it, that he could not foresee any prospect of it not being a waiver without some sort of solution from the government.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Okay, well, if there's no other comments on that, and say this has had quite a robust scrutiny, so I think we can take it that all those in favour of the recommendations in the report, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moves on to the next item, which is the tenancy strategy for registered providers of social housing 2024 to 2029. This one being introduced by Councillor Wilson. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. So I'll pass over to Councillor Wilson.
Cheers, thank you, Leader. The Localism Act requires councils to prepare and publish a tenancy strategy for social housing providers as part of its strategic role for the area. That sets out the matters which providers should have regard to when formulating policies relating to the type of tenancies they will grant. We, as a registered provider of social housing, must also have regard to our own strategy. It supports the harmonisation approach to the use of flexible fixed-term tenancies within the council's own housing stock. All tenancy strategies held by previous legacy authorities supported the discretionary use of flexible fixed-term tenancies. The use of these tenancies have been relatively low, and most providers have moved away from using them. The reasons for this are that they do not achieve their aims, they create uncertainty for tenancy, add complexity, increase resource requirements to ourselves and social providers, and require them to manage them effectively, as they can act as a barrier to supporting tenants to manage their tenancies. The revised tenancy strategy supports the use of lifetime tenancies rather than fixed-term tenancies to provide assurance to tenants and kind of contribute to creating a sustainable community. It will continue to allow the discretionary use of fixed-term tenancies in appropriate circumstances, but generally we're supporting the lifetime use of tenancies. So I'm happy to bring this strategy forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do we have any members not on Cabinet wishing to speak on this? Councillor Canavan, I thought you might like to speak on this one. Please do go ahead.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to Councillor Wilson and the team for putting this strategy together. I just wanted to check that my understanding is correct. The scope of this paper covers registered social housing providers, as I understand it, which the paper makes clear includes the local authority itself. So I am just wondering whether there is another piece of work here that we could do to extend this tenancy strategy to the private sector. There does seem to me to be a big gap between the protection of tenants in who are in registered social housing provider accommodation and those in the private sector. So I am keen to explore whether it's possible to extend this policy to the private sector, especially in order to be able to tackle the issues that we have constantly around Section 21 and people being made homeless. So any work that we could do to do that would be most appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. I'm going to ask Councillor Wilson to come back directly on that before I come to Cabinet discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Yeah, I think you raised a really good point around the need to tackle some of the issues within the private rented sector. Unfortunately, this document wouldn't be able to expand to the private rented sector, but we are going to be doing a piece of work to encourage those in the private rented sector to deal with these tenancy issues. So that's going to be coming forward in the spring in our housing strategy revision. And yeah, so it's a piece of work that we're looking towards, but unfortunately this is something that we require as part of the Localism Act and is just specifically for social housing providers. So I hope that's helpful, but be reassured we are looking into the issues within the private rented sector separately, and we will bring something forward in due course.
Can I just get clarity? I mean, the vast majority of people in private tenancies sign an assured short hold tenancy. And when they've signed an assured short hold tenancy, which is the norm, then they've signed their assured short hold tenancy. Our role, presumably, is in making sure that the private sector enforcement team that we have, which do some great work in making sure that the quality of the property is people have their rights. They're able to exercise their rights to ensure their properties are of decent quality and their landlords treat them fairly. But presumably, once somebody's signed an assured short hold tenancy, which is normal, we can't suddenly say to a landlord, you have to do a lifetime tenancy. That would be quite odd, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be encouraging it from that perspective, but what we can do is we can have a strategy for working with private landlords in order to encourage them to maintain and have good tenancy management. So I think we can as well, just outside of any strategy, work on relationships with private landlords better in order to make sure that they're, for example, when an eviction happens, they're probably informing us in good time that they're planning on doing that. So that allows us to relieve the homelessness duty, etc., etc. So I think there's loads of stuff that we can be doing around that. And that's the piece of work that we're going to be working on in the future. But as you say, yeah, we can't prescribe private landlords to use lifetime tenancies, and we can't prescribe registered providers in the area to use lifetime tenancies. This is a strategy, this is guidance that they have to take note of and adhere to, and they would be using it generally, but equally they can go their own way.
So I'm just trying to see who else was on council in 2011. I don't know whether Jeff was on a council back then in another part of the country, but I do remember this legislation changing in 2011 and a lot of us being very, very nervous about what it would do to communities when people who are in council housing would no longer have the security that they would stay in their community, and would it unravel, you know, the social fabric. So it's really interesting that we got from the fear of not doing lifetime tenancies and having these to allow the throughput and to enable the downsizing of people, and now it's sort of almost been you know, ruled as not really working. My only fear on that is when I read the paper, there was a suggestion that there was an element of that act, and it may be that Seamus who's just gone, I think, but I was going to ask Seamus if he knew the answer. I was just wondering whether you know that there was a part of the act that hadn't been enforced, and was there any risk to us that if I'm going to be slightly political, so I always like to warn people. I think if there's a change of government, there's absolutely no risk that a Labour government would enforce things that don't advantage people who are in social housing. But if there's a new Conservative government, is there a risk that they might say, actually, we want to pursue this, and therefore, if we've moved away, does there present then a risk to us that we aren't complying with what the government wants?
In terms of using fixed term, okay, yeah, I don't think so, to be honest, because I think nationally and generally local authorities are moving away from this, and social housing providers in general. So I don't think there is that appetite. I mean, I think early on, when these were introduced, it was pretty clear that they weren't having the effect that the government wanted them to have when they brought them in. So I don't think it's high on the government's agenda, to be honest, to maintain or kind of prescribe that local authorities use these type of tenancies.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I guess the part of it is why were they introduced in the first place, and I think it was about trying to look at under occupancy, and again, we have a real problem in terms of families, particularly in bed and breakfast, and not having suitable accommodation. So there is kind of something about how we can incentivise people to right-size their property, staying in the community that they're in, and to help them, and that is covered in the paper. But it talks in terms of there are other methods. But I wonder if you just how do we support people to think about are we still in the right? Am I still in the right sort of property for myself, and can I make space for somebody else to make better use of it?
Yeah, I think that's another really good point. I think that it's an area where we need to do better at, to be honest. I think we do have incentives to get people to move, but we don't advertise them tremendously well. But also it's about trying to, because I think the biggest barrier between, kind of Mrs. Niggins, who's in an oversized house wanting to downsize, is wanting to be close to the area and the community that she knows. So it's trying to link up those properties in those areas better. And again, I think this is something that we want to see more of as the new kind of revised housing strategy comes forward. But yeah, I think we do have incentives, we do have a program, and we do get moves happening occasionally, but probably not as often as we could. I know one of my next door neighbours was wanting to downsize, and there wasn't anything around her. So that's trying to match that up at the time they want to kind of move on is can be quite difficult. But yeah, I think it's definitely an area that we want to see improvements on.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley and Councillor Wilson. Anybody else wanting to speak? No. In which case, if we can approve this as our new. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to make one last point that I kind of forgot to mention in my opening, but just the cost that this has to the HRA, the amount we're going to save by moving towards the lifetime tenancies as well, because the process of the fixed term flexible is around probably about 20 or 30,000, which is going to be used to improve customer service and kind of some of our regulatory stuff that's coming in April. So that's going to see an improvement for residents within the HRA. So yeah, just wanted to kind of get that positive news in as well.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. So this is a cabinet decision. This doesn't need to go to full council. So the recommendation is to approve the revised BCP Council tenancy strategy. So all those in favour of doing so? Excellent. That is approved. That takes us on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9, the Active Travel Fund 4. This is going to be presented by Councillor Hadley. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Leader, I'm quite happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. So over to you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so much earlier in the year, we were fortunate to get a grant from government under the ATF 4 scheme to look at a number of routes. And as part of our local walking and cycling infrastructure plan, there's a strong identification of trying to extend routes that already exist, and to make routes make more sense by linking them up. So the emphasis was on extending links that were planned. This paper is really just to seek delegation to get on with it, and it's been delayed. And there were some questions about we had this money in this financial year. We need to crack on with it. So what we're being asked to do today is really just to confirm or recommend to council to delegate the implementation. Paragraph 8 talks about the specific schemes, and it's around part of the Wallace Down Road. We've already done several elements of the Wallace Down Road, but extending that and the Turberry Park link. making some of our school streets measures permanent in our first school street. So there's some hard infrastructure work to put in better gates that will work for longer term on those school streets that we want to make permanent. And obviously there's some more temporary ones behind that we'd like to expand the school streets programme. The beta footpath. So on Whitecliff, the footpath has been separated to provide a walking route, cycling route. That's been successful, I think, generally, and the intention is to roll that right the way around through beta, including there's a separate piece of work about the gully at the entrance to the lagoon in Poole Park, and it will link up with the work that's going on there. And the fourth one is the Bournemouth Gardens. So it's beyond the work that came under the Transforming Travel link, which improved the bottom half of that path. Is extending that up through towards Coy Pond. There's then also work on planning development of the fourth part of Wallasdown Road, which is the boundary road to University Roundabout. So it's how to get past the university, and also the crossroads, both of which are quite difficult schemes, particularly the crossroads scheme at Wallasdown, because there's an awful lot of businesses and shops there that need to be taken account of. So for those two, it's about designing those, consulting on them, or looking at the scheme with hope that there'll be future rounds of funding that we can bid for to actually implement them. So that's the schemes, and the request is to recommend delegation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillors Canavan or Bartlett, either of you wishing to speak on this one? Nope. Anybody in Cabinet wishing to speak on this one? Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Leader. I was just going to say, as the lead for road safety on Cabinet as well, that I'm really glad that we're able to move forward with this fund. I think that the work that's been done so far, I've been very lucky in my ward to have some improvements. I know that other councillors have as well. And yeah, just hoping that we'll be able to improve road safety through this as well. Thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I'm very pleased that the idea of linking up, well, what we already have, the frustration always is with people who use active transport corridors is when they appear and then disappear, and then you're left stranded before you join the next section. So the linking up, I think, is really good use, and it would be really good to move on with this quickly. So anything that we can do to speed up this, I'm in favour of.
And Councillor Hadley, I'm aware that the grant that's been given has to be committed during this financial year, which it will be, because this will come to full council in February. Is there a requirement under the grant of when the works have to be commenced or completed? I know we'll work as quickly as possible, but I just want to make sure there's no risk in terms of capacity in losing the money having accepted it.
Well, yes, I have the same hope, Leader. Part of applying for these grants was looking at schemes that were, I think the term they use is shovel ready, and that we had already planned some of the detail on them, and that the 4 schemes that are intended to be implemented have been planned in detail. So yes, I think the work is, the preparation work is already underway, but it is about ensuring that we can move forward at pace.
Councillor Hadley. Councillor Martin. Correct first name, wrong second name.
Slightly off point, although it's about road safety. It's just a little anecdote from earlier this week. Coming to Cabinet next month is a recommendation to reduce the speed limits in Highcliffe to speed limits, which are 40 and going down to 30. The reason I mention it is in the context of road safety. So I put something on Facebook earlier in the week. Yeah,
that was brave of you.
Schoolboy error. I put something on Facebook saying this is great news, blah 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 blah, and I got an absolute battering from people, from clearly drivers. Many of them don't actually live in the ward, about what a stupid idea. The whole place should be 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, etc., etc. So I just mentioned that because there's clearly a lot of work to be done about educating people about speed and road safety. So this might be an opportunity to do some comms around that. But I must admit, I was absolutely staggered by the reaction to what I thought was a really piece of good news about road safety.
I'll just add to that anecdote. About 2 years ago, we finally managed to get Lower Blandford Road in Broadstone moved from a 40 to a 30. It had previously been the same speed as the bypass and Gravel Hill, the two main roads on either side. And so sat navs were automatically routing vehicles that way because it was 40, it was most direct. It had taken us 10 years to get that speed reduction. We still don't have the zebra crossing on it that I'm not going to give up on. But we had an absolute fight on our hands. But the vast majority of people, now that it's in, can't imagine that it would have ever been a 40-mile-an-hour road. It's got over 100 houses on it. It's got a cycle lane on it. You know, it's got bus stops on it. It's crazy that it was ever 40. And actually, the sat navs typically will take you on the bypass because the sat nav will look to where the speed limit is. So hold your nerve. Hold your nerve. It's the right thing to do. If it's gone through a period of consultation and it's gone through a democratic process, you know, it's not like you've just come in and done it. It's gone through a process. Usually there are many more people who will petition in favour on it, but they're not going to put their heads above the parapet on social media because it's going to get blown off, as we know. You know, you're a very brave person to face the internet trolls.
Could I just add that you know, I've just forgotten what I was going to add. No, well, I did what it was. You just mentioned it took 10 years to get the speed reduction in one you're referring to. Thanks to our brilliant traffic team, it's only taken 9 months from request to getting it to Cabinet. Thank you.
Councillor Burton.
Yeah, at risk of going off on a tangent on this about road safety in traffic speeds, I've seen very similar comments about speeds. One misnomer which a lot of people promote is that modern cars are much are safer, designed now to be able to stop quicker. When the highway code was written, cars didn't have such good brakes. That is to a certain extent true, but one thing that hasn't been upgraded in that time is drivers' ability. There's total stopping distance, of course, 30 mile an hour. Majority of it is driver thinking time. Most accidents happen. A driver will hit the pedestrian still at 30 mile an hour before they've actually applied the brakes, and therefore that message needs to be getting out very clearly. It's not the car's fault; it's actually the driver's issue. They're not reacting quick enough and still hitting pedestrians at 30 mile an hour.
Thank you. And we do have a paper coming, I think, in April on a 20-mile-an-hour programme, which Councillor Earl referenced last night. So road safety and you know, making sure that everybody has the right to go out and walk in their street is something that we are going to be dealing with quite a lot in the coming months. And I am aware that one of our members of the public has been talking at length for many years in the area around Camford Cliffs about ridiculous levels of speeding. So, you know, for everybody who's angsty about it, there are more people who are genuinely worried for their safety and the safety of their families, their dogs and whatever. So, Councillor Hadley, and welcome to Councillor Brown, who's now joined us.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because part of the reason we have to invest in measures for active travel, for encouraging people, supporting people walking and cycling, you mentioned a zebra crossing to help people crossing the road, is because of driver behaviour. And it's getting worse, and certainly since COVID, it seems there are people who are less tolerant. Cars are bigger. They have all sorts of safety features for the occupants, but they don't actually have an awful lot of safety features for people outside of the cars. And that's part of the reason why we have to invest in active travel. Is to support everyone and support our communities, and as you said, particularly on some of our across the whole area actually. And I think, you know, the roads you refer to will come back to us next month, but it's not long sections of road, and part of the excuse that people will go is, I didn't realise the speed had changed here. We need consistency. We need it to be clear. We need to support people travelling by all means. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. So if there's no other comments, this is one that we have to recommend to council. It is on the agenda for February so that we meet that deadline. So all those in favour of so recommending? Thank you. And I'm assuming Councillor Brown is abstaining because he wasn't here for the discussion. Thank you. So that brings us on to agenda item 10, which is another one from Councillor Hadley. Proposed shared flood and coastal erosion risk management service with East Devon District Council. Councillor Hadley, do you have a seconder?
So I'm also quite happy to second that one.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Over to you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. This is good news Tripoli, if I can call it that. I listened to the East Devon cabinet meeting where they were looking to agree to this, and they were very welcoming of BCP's input because effectively the cost for them is less than employing one individual, one expert, and it gives them access to our team. From our perspective, it gives we have a team that are already working across the southwest with lots of different authorities, and we tend to be called in by those authorities when they've got a problem to solve or a project they want to do. What this allows us to do with East Devon is to help them to manage their capital programme more proactively. And a lot of this is about accessing grants from the Environment Agency. We have been very successful in our own area in accessing monies from the Environment Agency for flood protection, particularly where households or permanent residences are at risk. And by entering an agreement with East Devon Council, it allows us to help them to manage that process. If there's additional costs within this, then they would be met from the capital schemes that are consequent. And as a district council, they don't have the capacity, the expertise within house. They made reference in their discussion to Coastal Partners, which is the East Solent area, which was a shared service that actually our head of service originally set up. And that's very successful for areas like Portsmouth and Havant and the whole of the East Solent. In working as one, it means you can retain better experts that are well regarded nationally, that know the system with the Environment Agency and other agencies in terms of what we can do, how we need to work with the maritime management organisation. So it's a complicated area. It's a good news story for us. It's a good news story for East Devon, and it's also good for the Environment Agency because they like to have experts to deal with. They recognise there are a limited number of these people who have the expertise to be able to help us to support not just the coastal flooding but also inland flooding, which is, as we know through climate change and through recent events, is getting more difficult. And it's not just about block gullies; it's about the intensity of rainfall, the time scale of that, and the impact of the rivers rising more quickly than we've seen in the history. So that's the recommendation is to agree to enter the shared service agreement with East Devon.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Any non-cabinet members wanting to speak on this one? No, I just want to clarification, Councillor Hadley. Obviously, we have a fantastic team. The team led by Matt really are exceptional at what they do. Obviously, we still have flooding. Just for clarity, this is a strategic organisation. This isn't about, the rotas for when the gullies get cleaned or the leaves get swept, because clearly, they're experts in doing this, but we've still, all of us will get people sort of quite rightly saying, when are you going to clean the leaves off my road? That's not what FSERM does, is it? It's a total, that street scene, as opposed to this is strategic infrastructure about getting millions of pounds for coastal defence and things.
Absolutely, it is. But there are areas like, for instance, Kinston that have suffered some severe flooding, and our flooding and coastal erosion risk management team will support planning. So they work with the planning officers as experts to be pulled in to look at, as you say, there's more strategic issues about how do we resolve this, how do we work with Wessex Water, with the Environment Agency, with others to resolve long-standing problems and provide advice to different parts of our council. But absolutely, the gully cleaning and managing the leaves is for the environment team, which is also under my portfolio, and that is an ongoing struggle, obviously, in the current financial situation.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this one? If not, this is a decision for us to agree to enter the shared service agreement. So if nobody wants to speak on this one, in that case, we'll just go straight to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. That brings us on to agenda item 11, which is the south part of Beach Road car park. This one I am introducing. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Earl. Yeah, happy to second. Okay. So in introducing this paper, it's just really a reminder, and for those of us who came from the Borough of Poole, this is the third or possibly the fourth time that this paper in various iterations has come to council. Obviously, it was declared underutilised, and it was declared surplus most recently in March. We've heard concerns from local people about whether it is or it isn't underutilised, but the paper demonstrates that in high season and in low season, or lower season because it is closed in the winter, that this car park is not well used. Future Places obviously were asked to look at this to actually assess the way forward with it, and we have made the decision previously to crack on and sell this for housing. It was allocated, it was quite a long time ago, back in 2015. It was established that the capacity meant that it was reasonable to release the southern section, and then in the Poole local plan it was allocated as suitable for 60 homes. So this is almost a decade old, and I think we really just need to get on with this now, because it is, I don't know how many people have used this car park. I've certainly attempted to use it quite a lot. It does suffer from unauthorised encampments, and that's mainly because it is very overgrown. Most of the car parking is not well laid out. There's tree roots in the ground, and so it's not actually a very pleasant place to park. That certainly the higher end, which is the end that's being proposed to sell, you have to climb quite a steep hill back from the beach with your buckets and your spades and everything else, whereas the lower part, which is being retained, you can access on a more level basis. So it has the potential to be improved as a car park and actually be made better with much more disabled parking. Totally agree with residents that the size of the Branksome Chine car park isn't adequate for Branksome Chine, but I don't think the answer is retaining both elements of this car park. It will enable there to be homes there which will generate economic activity. We know that there are concerns from the ward councillors have raised their concerns over the years, and we do have a statement from one of the ward councillors who's unable to, she was hoping to be online, but she's not. So our officers are going to read that statement. The suggestion is we could leave it. We could leave it just as it is. That wouldn't allow us any income to be able to put into the transformation, and we really wouldn't be able to justify borrowing money to improve a car park, which the evidence suggests that there is not the use of. So that isn't really an option. If we were to retain the car park and sell it with planning consent, which is sort of what Future Places were trying to move forward on, we'd be in a situation where it could take years for us to generate any income. And as we've seen with other sites, then the council retains all of the problems associated with that, and very little of the benefit. So the third option would be for us to develop it directly. Again, is this the site that we would want to develop, bearing in mind we want to move forward on private rental and affordable homes? So that takes us to the recommended option, which is to invite offers to sell it directly, to put in an overage clause that would ensure that actually if somebody was making a lot more money than expected from it, that the council gets the benefit of that. That's fairly standard practice. And to do it on a long lease potentially, so that we retain the ownership of the land. The next steps would be to really put it out to market. And my recommendation, and having sat on full council alongside Councillor Brown and Councillor Hadley, you know, for years while all of this was coming through, I think it's about time that we move forward. I take on board the issues raised by the residents, but I think that with the retention of the other part of the car park and the commitment to develop that as a more meaningful space, I really think that this is this will allow us to really generate some a decent sale and move forward. So Councillor Haynes has managed to join us in perfect timing. So I'm going to, first of all, Councillor Haynes, I'm going to just check that Councillor Bartlett doesn't have anything from overview and scrutiny. His personal comments on it, I'll come back to separately. But from the point of view of overview and scrutiny, I don't think they've looked at this recently. We may have looked at it years ago when I was on with you. He's not indicating. So I'm going to pass to Councillor Haynes to make her statement and then come back to other councillors.
Thank you, Leader. Can you actually hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
You can. Okay, right. I actually missed the start of this item coming to being presented. So if I repeat myself, because some of the points I am about to raise have actually been covered, then I apologise in advance. So it will come as no surprise that I have.
Councillor Haynes, before
Yes.
you go ahead, can I just clarify on this item? There is a confidential appendix at appendix 4. So if you were wishing to speak about the confidential appendix, we'd have to go into private session. So if you want to try and avoid that, that would be useful. If you want to speak about that later, I'm happy to grant you dispensation to come back in to talk about the appendix should we need to go there. That allows you us to keep as much above the line as possible.
Okay, thank you. There is no reference to the confidential, so we're fine for the time being. Thank you. So can I proceed?
Please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so it will come as no surprise that I have serious reservations on the sale of this car park. Many residents that live within this local area have expressed the frustration of inconsiderate parking on busy days, and the loss of this car park is perceived as adding or making this problem even worse. So paragraph 15 in the report before you sets up the main concerns that ward councillors have already expressed, and these concerns still hold and still remain. The arrival of the new owners for the restaurant in Branksome Chine, now known as Rockwater, has actually seen increased demand for car parking for their customers. So as part of the mitigation conditions on parking for this application being approved, the use of Beach Road car park was cited as an overspill car park. Now, this is actually at odds with this proposal, because if you're now planning to dispose of it, the southern side, it means at some stage the whole car park will actually be possibly closed, and therefore there won't even be the availability to actually use the part that's not actually being sold. The report goes on to say that this is considered as a sustainable location. Now, while there's a local centre within walking distance that provides some facilities, should people wish to actually go further, the report actually says that there are bus services. Yes, there are bus services. There are 2 bus services. Bus 50, which goes between Bournemouth and Swanage and operates between 7:30 and 8 p.m. and Bus 60, which goes between Rockley Park and Sandbanks and operates between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. So, and they're both hourly services. So whilst there are 2 bus services, on the face of it, it seems that, yes, you know, it's got good transport links, but actually they don't run. Some don't run early enough and some don't run late enough. So therefore, if someone needs to go to work and needs to use bus 60 and they start work at 9, that's not actually going to be possible. Or if someone wishes to go out and wants to stay beyond 8 p.m, again, taking the bus is not an option. So I would say that actually, despite the 2 bus services, transport-wise, is not in a sustainable location. And so therefore, I would actually say that the assessment within the decision impact assessment which is attached to this report pack, it's saying that transport and accessibility rating of green, I do not agree with it, because I don't think actually it's adequate enough to be classified as a green. Over recent years, visit numbers to our beaches has actually increased, and we know that for a fact post-COVID, and there is an increasing need for car park provision. Now, Beach Road car park can facilitate with this provision, and when I've met with representatives from Future Places, I was assured that any loss of car parking spaces will be made good as part of the improvement to the remaining section of this car park. And now suddenly I'm actually really rather alarmed to read that as part of the proposal to introduce parking charges on nearby streets to make good any potential loss from car parking income. Proposals to implement parking charges will, I can say right now, receive significant opposition from nearby streets, because I've actually spoken to a lot of residents that live in nearby streets, and this is not something they wish to have. So therefore, whether that will actually go ahead or not, pending consultation, and I do hope there'll be consultation if this is the direction of travel, you will receive considerable opposition for that. So I would actually urge Cabinet to actually reconsider whether this proposal is still justifiable, given changes in demand for car parking, as well as the lack of transparency in wanting to implement on-street car parking charges on nearby streets to mitigate any potential loss of income. You know, I accept that at the time, was it in 2015, this probably was surplus requirement, but things have moved on. The visitor demand has actually changed. And I think that to actually now consider disposing of this is probably no longer appropriate. So I would ask Cabinet to please reconsider this decision. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Do I have anybody other than Cabinet members wishing to speak on this? No, in which case I'm going to come directly back to a couple of those points before I introduce Cabinet members. I've got Councillor Hadley showing already. Just for clarity, this was just declared surplus. Obviously, the conversation started in 2015, but in 2023, in March, as detailed in the report, this was declared surplus under the administration previous to ours. So I'm sure you raised your concern with the previous two leaders of the council, and it was declared surplus at that point. So this is very up-to-date information, acknowledging Rockwater wasn't open then, but you know, ultimately, fundamentally, the use of Branksome as an area for as a seaside resort, you know, isn't markedly different from earlier in this year. The comments about whether it's a sustainable location, and obviously anything built on here would be subject to a planning application, and the applicant would be required to justify their travel plans and their sustainable offer. And I would urge you, if you have problem with the bus not running the hours or days that you would like them to, that you engage with the bus company. I've always found them to be incredibly helpful, and we'll always look at ways we can extend bus services if they are viable. And I know that there is a major planning application, obviously of a very different scale, in another part of the former borough of Poole, where there's a new bus service coming directly to support this. So, and finally, just on relation to the objections from residents, I cannot tell you how much, how many emails, phone calls and messages I've had from residents who are very close to Branksome Chine, who are frustrated that their desperation for parking restrictions in their area have been ignored, and they are not being heard, and they are putting together petitions and all sorts to say, give us parking restrictions on our road. They are very happy to have parking meters, and I think they'd be happy to go and help install them themselves. So whilst there will be some people who don't like them, there are plenty of people who do want them, and that's why a public consultation on something like that needs to come forward, and the outcome of that will be seen in due course. But there isn't a significant number of car parking losses, because the actual number of car park spaces that are being used on a regular basis is not many more than the future number of car parking spaces. So I think the paper's pretty robust, and I think having had Future Places assess it, and it come to us, I think 3 times, I think we need to, on balance, move forward with it. But I'm happy to listen to all of the Cabinet, who of course will make the ultimate decision. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, you mentioned that this first came up in Poole Council, and of course I was there, but in opposition as you were, and I believe Councillor Haynes was part of the administration at the time, so she was part of the decision making that suggested it was surplus. one of the problems with this car park is that it has been neglected for a very long time because it has been under threat or expectation that part of it was going to be disposed, and that's part of the reason that about half of the car parking spaces are actually unusable, as you mentioned, tree roots and uneven surface. Part of the you know, for me, I think it's interesting. One of the questions was about linking the two elements together, and I think that is just around how finance needs to be used in the council in terms of what we can do. But I think there is a commitment that in disposing of these south parts of the car park, that the north part of the car park will be done, but that they won't directly be linked in the way that the petitioner was requesting. I think signage could be improved. That the surfacing definitely needs to be improved. The point about metered car parking, Western Road adjacent to this car park already has metered car parking on it. So I was slightly surprised to see that in the report because there is already metered car park in the area. And I can remember Councillor Ron Parker, who's in Cliff Drive, not that far from here, wanting restrictions on his road because of people parking for extended periods on the public highway on the cliff top. And it's a problem we've got all the way along the coastal strip where people are taking advantage of parking for free in areas where and upsetting residents. So I think the constraints bit is something that we do need to test. Again, that's probably a separate issue. There's something about the shading and the trees, and I think that this whole area has a lot of trees, which is great, and very mature trees, and that includes the south area. So I'd be really keen that the development doesn't lose that tree cover and that canopy, and that's really important. And again, as you suggested, that will be partly for planning, but also for the north car park. That's really helpful if you're down on the beach in the summertime. You come back to a very hot car. That's not great. But the shading and again the tree cover and that natural surrounding of the car park is important to me. Thank you. Oh, sorry. And the other thing is just in terms of rock water. Yes, undoubtedly that has increased the use of the car parks. I think we do need to look at whether this car park should be open all year round or whether it is just a summer use car park with respect to that difference, because we have seen since COVID an awful lot more use of the beach and facilities along the beach, including into the evenings and potentially extending the season. So I think that will need to be part of our consideration, is whether the north part becomes an all year round car park.
I actually think that extending the northern one all year round is a really good idea, and actually I'd want to hear the reasoning why it's not, because actually, lots of us will go to the beach in the middle of winter, particularly those of us that want to walk our dogs and things. Actually, that northern car park, whilst it's difficult to use because of the surfacing, why not have access to that? So I think there's always been risk around unauthorised encampments, but again, they are less common in the winter. And with the demise of the Dorset Steam Fair, we may have fewer of them this year anyway. So I think Councillor Cox, car parking is in your remit. Can I just ask you to note, speaking to officers, about the potential of why wouldn't we have that car park open in the northern end, at least open in the winter?
I will indeed.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this one? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'll just comment. Obviously, having been a pool councillor prior to BCP, I've heard lots of discussions on this, and it's over 8 years of discussions and delay about what could be done with this site, what should be done with it, and as Councillor Hadley said, a neglect of the site, and it's just not doing anybody any service. The fact that it's just left to sort of rot a bit and becoming in a worse state, and then obviously the discussions and future places are looked at it, and a decision needs to be made. We've waited 8 years for something to happen, and I think it's to our credit that actually we've got the paper before us which spells it out very clearly about what our options are and what the pros and cons of those options are. I'm happy to support the recommended option as the way forward. The longer any sort of delay or dithering on this just means it doesn't support the council's finances. It just neglects the site. There's no clarity for the residents in that area. At least when a decision is made, whether people like it or not, at least there's clarity for the residents in that area about what the future for that site is. And I think we really just need to get on with this. It will help our financial position. I think people would criticise us if we just delayed and looked at different options and
put it into the long grass again, because that's doing no good for the residents of that area who still won't know what the future is. And it's doing no good for the council or for our finances.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Anybody else? Councillor Cobb.
I just wanted to emphasise what Councillor Brown just said about finances. I think we need, well, I know we need that money to help with our transformation, and therefore I see no other option other than to sell this car park as soon as possible.
Thank you. Anybody else, or shall we move to the vote on 3 recommendations to dispose of it? Subject to, we have to have a separate resolution to appropriate it for planning purposes. We have delegate the authority to the corporate property officer in conjunction with several other people to select the preferred offer and finalise the terms and support the reprovision of the car park and really clearly there in consultation with the ward councillors. So in terms of the modernisation and the improvement of what's left, councillors Haynes and Challoner will be involved in those conversations, and that commitment is here and now. So if there's no further discussion, we have 3 matters, and this is one that has to go to council as well, so we need to take this in February. So all those in favour of recommending this to council, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you to the members of the public who have stayed to hear that discussion. You're very welcome to stay, but if you want to go, we won't be at all offended. Moving on to agenda item 12, traffic order proposal transforming cities fund Darby's Lane Cycle Route 5 section 2 C 5.2. Councillor Hadley, this is yours. Do you have a seconder? Anybody? Councillor Cox, thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. This is a continuing section of the Transforming Travel plans, and it's particularly about linking the Nuffield Industrial Estate to Poole Town Centre and extending the Wimborne Road scheme that is under construction at present. And it provides improved enhancement for crossing the road by the park. And for the crossings of Dorchester Road and up towards Trigon Bridge. It's a reasonably small scheme. It will help with travel to school for some of the children that are using this route, walking, cycling, and wheeling. It's a part of the, as I say, a part of the Transforming Travel programme to move forward.
Thank you. Do we have any members not on Cabinet wishing to speak on this one? Don't have any ward councillors who are at the meeting. Nobody else is showing, so that brings it back to Cabinet. Anybody wishing to comment on this one? This is the sealing of the order, so this has already been through the process, and this is the sort of thing that presumably would go to the new tag if people did want to discuss it in any detail going forward after May. So anybody wish to speak? No, I'll then come back to Councillor Hadley.
Yes, just on that point, Leah, I suspect that sealing the orders probably will come back to us as Cabinet, having had the debate. So this might be the step in the process that comes to us, but I haven't gone into the detail yet of exactly how that will work in the new.
Yeah, so I think it does come back to us, but the debate would have been had. Therefore, anybody that felt the need to have a discussion about it, we wouldn't need to hopefully go through a full discussion here, but there is nobody wishing to discuss this one. This feels fairly straightforward. So all those in favour of approving sealing of the order? Excellent. Unanimous. Move on to agenda item 13, which is going to be introduced by Councillor Hannah, and I'm pretty sure that we are going to have some involvement here from both Councillor Bartlett and Councillor Canavan, who were at scrutiny on Monday. This is the council-owned company shareholder governance review, which Councillor Hannah took to scrutiny on Monday. It's going again to audit tomorrow, so it's getting a jolly good airing. So I'm going to ask Councillor Hannah to introduce it. Then I'll go to Councillor Bartlett, then to Councillor Canavan if he wishes to speak, and then come to Cabinet. So Councillor Hannah, over to you. Oh, and I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Leader. Could I say that I'm grateful to Mr. O'Donnell for having authored the report and for the work involved behind it. He has looked at 3 reviews that have taken place One was an independent governance review following a letter from the government minister to the council. That review included consideration of issues relating to future places. There was then also the internal audit team's draft governance briefing note, which is covered in Appendix 4 of the report. And there was a review by the interim chair and non-executive directors of future places who considered that area themselves. Based on those, the detail of the issues identified is set out in the report, and the proposed arrangements are summarised in the table in Appendix 4. The key considerations are a clarification of the respective roles of councillors, council officers, and the companies themselves, and of the decision-making process. On the latter, the decision-making process, it's proposed that it is for Cabinet to determine what policy and budget by considering and approving the annual business plan for each company. Those will have been prepared by council officers working with the company and taking into consideration, or should I say, and Cabinet will be taking into consideration the views and advice of scrutiny. It is then for the company to determine how the plan will be delivered. Council officers will serve as shareholder members of the respective boards and will advise the portfolio holder and Cabinet as appropriate. The intention that the report sets out is to review the governance of our companies applying this model, those reviews to be completed by the end of March, with action plans as appropriate coming to Cabinet in July. As I mentioned on Monday evening at scrutiny, I'm also proposing that the reviews include considering the overall business case for each company to ensure that each is still the best means of delivering our policy objectives. I am extremely grateful to members of scrutiny for the discussion that took place on Monday evening. I know that Councillor Bartlett has several points that he is likely to put to us that arose from that discussion, and I have had prior knowledge of what those points are. Following the discussion, I have liaised with Mr. O'Donnell, and I further amended the recommendation to take account of those suggestions. I'm hoping that the amended wording for the recommendation has been circulated to you as I speak. But if I may take Cabinet through the revised wording, the original wording of the recommendation is as on the paper. Number 1 was to approve the shareholder governance model. There's set out at Appendix 1. There's a proposed amendment to that, which is on the third box on the right, which had been worded to suggest that that the company has no rule of scrutiny. We're confirming that scrutiny may actually scrutinize as it wishes. So that's being reworded to say company may be requested to provide evidence to support scrutiny as required. Number 2 is unchanged. Number 3 is unchanged. There is an additional number 4, which is noting that the review of council companies will also consider in each case whether the original reason for establishing the company still applies, and will appraise the future options for delivering the function provided by the company, taking into account the cost benefits. And this is where I'm grateful to scrutiny for suggesting these aspects. So part of that will be taking into account the cost benefits, the benefits to residents, the potential for accountability and transparency, and the avoidance of potential conflict between the aims of the council and those of the council company. So we'll be working out exactly how well the company fulfills the need and whether there are other options taking into account all of those. And number 5 is just a clarification of the scope of the report and the reviews that are proposed by the report, which is that it is limited to companies where the council is a shareholder. The intention then is a second phase, which will be the subject of a future report, which will consider council control and representation on the boards of other organisations such as charities, associations, community interest companies and societies. So it is that amended wording which I am moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. And I hope that demonstrates the significant benefit and added value of this going to scrutiny, because these recommendations have been substantially improved. Yeah, I thank everybody who was involved in that, whether they were members of the scrutiny committee or attended to offer their thoughts. So I'm going to pass to Councillor Bartlett, because this was a big debate, just to see whether you think that those amendments do properly reflect some of the concerns raised, whether there's other issues that you think that the messages from the meeting that you'd like to bring to our attention.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, it's all after 3 consecutive meetings, it's all becoming a bit muddled, I have to say. It's difficult to remember back to Monday evening. But I did have time this morning to have a very quick look at the revised paper that was before you this morning. And now that's been amended again. And I have to say my thanks to the portfolio holder and Ian for taking on board the comments made in the meeting and to see them now reflected in the amended recommendations. And I'm delighted that that's happened, and that does actually obviate a number of the issues that I intended to raise this morning, because I think you basically have covered the main issues. What I would say probably is that we really welcome this report, and we understand that the assurance reviews that sort of generated the need for it will provide clarity across the board. But one of the concerns that isn't perhaps touched on is that most of the concerns have been generated from the experience with Future Places Limited, and yet it feels like there's a one-size-fits-all solution to operations that the company that the council have had with several of its companies, which have been operating very successfully and under full scrutiny for many years. Seascape, for example, BBML, and those which have been almost just part of the council's routine operations, with full accountability given. So there was a concern that those experiences of Future Places may unnecessarily have affected what is actually a fairly routine and successful arrangement. But nevertheless, the suggestion that that each of these companies' futures will now be reviewed in detail, each of them individually, to actually determine whether they're needed, and what the business case for them is got to be welcomed. I think it does really need to be looked at. So I think that's great, and I'm sure that the governance arrangements for each of those companies will be looked at the time to see if they are currently adequate or they can be disposed of. But I understand from this paper that these measures are going to be implemented immediately. It'll be interesting to see what changes will occur immediately, and I'm sure Overview and Scrutiny will be looking at that to see if we're actually going to be doing what we say we're now going to do. Just talking about the Overview and Scrutiny, I did make a bit of a meal about saying what the Overview and Scrutiny would do, or might do, or might wish to do. Just to bring one example of Overview and Scrutiny where it probably fell down with regard to Overview with Future Places Limited. I recall an Overview and Scrutiny session where Future Places was in front of us, and we questioned the number of projects that they'd actually taken on board, because there was concern they'd been stretched far too far. And this was around the commissioning issues. And I do recall the company saying, no, well, it's fine, we're bringing on all the extra consultants, blah, 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 blah. had we talked to the commissioning side of it, we might have got a very different picture, because it was one of the themes that came out of the, you know, the review, that the commissioning issues were were difficult for the council. The resources weren't there, and consequently, you know, there was this sort of scope growth for future places, which didn't help at all. So, you know, ONS, if necessary, will have to dive into other areas, which the council has a responsibility in the terms of the way it's managing its shareholder responsibilities for the companies that it owns. There were a number of issues specifically I was going to raise, but these have been accommodated within the report and the revisions that Councillor Hannah has just made. So I don't think there's too much I need to say. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, the issue about members being on the boards of company-owned, council-owned companies. I think, you know, it was stated in the meeting that it was broadly accepted that they shouldn't be. I'm not sure who says they're broadly not accepted or where that evidence is. And it may be horses for courses. We don't know until you actually start looking at what the company does and how it's embedded within the company's, the council's own structure as to what really representation you need. I think so. The one size fits all process is perhaps, you know, it may not always be appropriate. There may be occasions when you need to have member directors on companies. It really depends on how it fits, its operations fit in with the council. So I wouldn't just assume that will never happen. I think that does need to be considered very, very carefully. So I think that's it, Leader. And thanks again to portfolio holder, and thanks for the meeting on Monday.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Canavan, I know you had some issues on this one as well. Would you like to add anything?
I think, well, thank you, first of all. I think Councillor Bartlett has pretty much covered the points that I would want to raise, and I would echo his thanks to the portfolio holder and to Mr. O'Donnell for making these changes, because I think they go a long way to addressing the concerns which were raised at overview and scrutiny. I do have some issues on Tricura, which I'm going to save until the next item on the agenda. But no, just a thank you again. And I do think these amended wordings, which I only saw, by the way, about 5 minutes ago.
So did we.
But it's, yeah, you know, quick reading. They do seem to go a long way, and I'm very grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. I think yesterday was a very, very busy day for all of us and a very long night. And I must have had 10 emails during the course of yesterday, right up until midnight, with Mr. O'Donnell and Councillor Hannah revising, amending. So the work that's gone on, and actually, if you reflect back, you know, the reason that we moved the schedule of ONS boards under the previous administration for there to be a reasonable gap, so that anything that came from ONS had time for us to properly go through the process, was to enable that. And actually only having 36 hours has been difficult, but I think they've done a sterling job. But we only had it as Councillor Hannah was speaking. I just want to make a couple of points, if that's okay, having attended scrutiny as well on Monday and spent a lot of time on this one. I've been a board member of Seascape Group, and I've also been part of the executive shareholder group of Tricura during my time. And I think what's really interesting is that the model that's being proposed here sits much more closely to the model of Tricura, which feels right. You know, it sits slightly aside from the organisation. Now, there's a conversation about whether Tricura is the right thing, and that's for another day, and that's why the review is happening. But it's interesting that the executive shareholder model is being run for Tricura. Seascape, on the other hand, which you suggested was doing perfectly fine, I've always felt Seascape does not meet its potential. And when I was on Seascape the first time around, we did have an independent member who was from business and who did have the skills to be able to try and drive that business forward. I'm assuming he retired or was no longer interested in continuing, but there isn't any more. And I feel that when we have the board meetings, we aren't the right people to drive that organisation forward. So I think that whilst there may or may not be an argument for keeping Seascape and BBML, we might need them in order to protect our housing assets from right to buy, or so we can access funding. I'm not convinced that myself, Councillor Earl, Mr. Whittles are the right people to run a business like that. It's just that's not my skill set. So, it's all right, but I just think that this is an opportunity for us to pause. I'm just in reference to scrutiny's role. I completely accept there's an opportunity to quiz and question people involved with the companies, but I do also still think that that scrutiny should be pointing its real energy towards scrutinising the portfolio holder and the corporate directors involved, so that they can answer to scrutiny because they are the ones accountable. But I think it's absolutely right that other people can give evidence to help to understand if something's going off kilter. And the final point is around, I agree with you, there may be cases where it is right to veer away from the best practice guidance, but I would assume that in those cases there would be a paper that said, on this occasion we are going down a different route and this is why, and that would go through the democratic process and be fully justified. So I think as long as it, in my mind, every rule is there to have an exception. The point is whether that exception has been challenged and tested and gone through the right process. So I'd be comfortable with the fact that there may be times in the future where we did something different, but it needs to have good justification. So turning to Cabinet, Councillor Cox, you were first to show, then Councillor Hadley.
Thanks, Leader. Just to go back on your point about having councillors as directors, then I agree that we shouldn't be directors. I think there is a political risk for councillors to be on boards like this. I have absolutely no doubt there are certain councillors that certainly think they can run companies on a commercial basis, and obviously I'm not referring to the previous leader of the council, but the council needs to be protected from that kind of person, because clearly they are not fit for that kind of role. And so I would welcome the fact that we are not allowed to be in that case. I've got two little queries in terms of the paper. One is in respect of the people that are being included in Appendix 1 and 2, the membership of those boards. It includes the Corporate Director of Resources, which I didn't think we were having anymore.
It's a very good. Well, we currently have Ian is still with us.
An interim, yes. But
we haven't cancelled his contract just yet, but I think that is a fair comment. We'll ask officers to clarify what the intention is if that role is being deleted.
Yeah, and then the other one is really a little point, but I kind of think it's important in the new number 4 in the recommendation, where it says the potential for accountability and transparency. I would prefer potential to be replaced by importance. There should be no potential about accountability and in transparency. It should be important. I personally believe it should be more about importance. That's a small change.
Thank you. Before I move on, just for clarity, Janie, sorry, just Councillor Wells just pointed out to me, in terms of the fact that some of us are directors of those companies, do we need to declare that interest because we're changing the governance of those organisations? Much as we'd like to not be directors, but
Sorry, Chair. Yes, you do need to declare an interest, but you don't need to leave the room at this point. So it is satisfactory to declare it for the purpose of the minutes, but you absolutely do not need to leave the room.
so for clarity, I'm a director of Seascape Group. Councillor Earl?
I'm also a director of Seascape Group.
Councillor Wilson?
I'm a director of Seascape Homes and Properties, BBML, and yes. So yeah, all of them.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just for complete clarity, I'm a nominated member of the Tricura Executive Shareholder Group. We haven't met recently, and the suggested future chair of the Executive Shareholder Group of Tricura.
Okay, Councillor Hadley?
Yeah, I think it probably applies to paragraph 5, but I'm a director of the Pool Bid as an external organisation, as a representative of the council.
Is anybody else a director of a bid?
Yes, I'm director of Christchurch Bids.
This doesn't apply to the LEP, does it? Because you and I are directors of that. And this is where you can see the ridiculousness of the fact that, you know, you've got these nominal directorships, which, you know, we're all sitting on Companies House, and actually our role is as leading the council. Is anybody we've missed who, I don't know who the other directors of BBML and Seascape South and Seascape Properties are. They must be non-cabinet members. Okay. So have we got all of that recorded? Of course, you can look up our Director of Registered Interests on the website for anyone who might be interested. So, Councillor Hadley, thank you, Councillor Earl, for raising that.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think actually I welcome the additions, paragraph 4 in particular, and certainly in coming into the role and looking at particularly some of the existing companies from Bournemouth, I did scratch my head in terms of why are we doing this? Why have we got why is it appropriate for the council to be running these companies? So where Councillor Cox refers to councillors shouldn't be involved, if there is a community interest, I think there is a value sometimes in councillors being involved in decision making for companies that exist in order to further the objectives of a council. But it is about being transparent and clear and understanding the rationale for why that is so and why it's a valuable and valid involvement. I think the independent directors are really important in that process. My one query was around paragraph 5, and it was particularly around other organisations and the wording of council control and representation. So representation, absolutely understand, but council control of charities and community interest companies and societies, very often they want to be independent. They are independent, and we are there because we're invited to be there to contribute and to represent, but not to control. So it is a follow-on piece of work, but I just query that the use of control for other bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of say, I kind of agree with the idea that it's not necessarily a bad thing to have councillors. Whilst I completely agree with your point, Leader, around, you know, needing that expertise on the board. I think that's really important. I do think these are companies that are effectively owned by the public, you know, as the council, and you're potentially lacking that democratic deficit. So I think it's something to be conscious of, particularly in terms of Seascape, where it's Seascape Homes, where it's kind of committing to, you know, we use that for kind of homelessness and things like that. It's not particularly, for me, I don't see it as necessarily the worst thing in the world to have that oversight from councillors. Just on the kind of more technical thing, if and when this paper is approved, obviously it's all coming in with immediate effect. So will we have to resign our directorships today, or can we just get some? What does that mean for the companies?
Can I ask the monitoring officer just to clarify the process?
Thank you, Chair. There is no need to immediately submit resignation or anything. That will be a stage process. My anticipation of working with Ian
and colleagues, is that this is very much working with you so that you're fully informed as directors, and we fully work with the companies in question so that it's a staged handover. So it won't be a shock to anyone. It won't damage the reputation or the business that they're trying to achieve and deliver. So we don't want any sort of decrease in service offer that they are responsible for. So it will be very staged. We will work with you, and as democratic services as well, we will also support in terms of the appropriate corrections or amendments that are needed to declarations of interest and register of interest.
Thank you. I've just suddenly thought of one. Who's the director of the BDC? Oh, no. Is it one of us? Okay. Did you want to declare that one?
Can I formally declare my interest as a trustee director of BH Line?
I think Janie makes a good point in that actually those businesses need to carry on trading, and if the directors were to resign today, we'd have a problem in that we wouldn't actually be able to meet our budgetary requirements to deliver the things like the disabled facilities grants and delivering homes for people who are rough sleeping otherwise. So it's good that she's clarified that, but also good that we haven't got to do a mass resignation. That would be fun. Councillor Martin, and then I'm coming to Councillor Cox and then Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It seems to me that this whole issue of council-owned companies is quite a really thorny one in terms of public perception. And I reflect back on in my previous incarnation in His Majesty's Press, trying to do features and stories and find information about the Bournemouth Development Company, which obviously most of our officers were not around when that was set up. And we found that incredibly frustrating. So I think there is an issue about how the public sees the transparency or otherwise of these organisations. And I think we can all reflect on the experience of BCP Future Places and the damage that's done to the reputation of the council and trust in the council and trust in processes. So I really welcome this report. I think it's a brilliant piece of work by Mr. O'Donnell and Councillor Hannah. I think it will go a long way to restoring some of that trust and reputation that damage that was caused. I have to say, one might think that there's a very limited extent to which the public take an interest in things like council-owned companies. But I have to say, and I think I may have made this point before, but having fought 2 elections in 6 months, I was absolutely staggered by the number of people who had an opinion on BCP Future Places and were very angry about it and very concerned about it. So I think it is an issue that the public are interested in. I think this goes very much back to the formation of the Three Towns Alliance and the pledge to be open and transparent and to bolster the scrutiny process, which it clearly has played a part in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. So I think we're going to get everybody here. So we've got Councillor Cox, Brown, Burton, Earl, and then I think everyone's had a speak, and then we'll come back to Councillor Hannah to tie up any loose ends. So go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasise again that the fact that we say in that paragraph 4, we're taking into account, and in my opinion, it's the importance of accountability and transparency. And that's what when we're representing the council, we should be there representing them as shareholders of these companies, not as directors. And there was a point, I think last night actually in the council meeting, when we tried to appoint we did appoint a director of Future Places, and there was some question mark as to whether we needed a director, and we do. Those companies do need a director. It needs direction, but we as the shareholders shouldn't be doing that direction, because I think it's risky for the council politically and commercially, and therefore we should be there representing the council as shareholders. And the Tricura model, and I was once on that shareholder group, is a good model to follow on that basis.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks, Leader. I really welcome this report actually, and in light of the experience we've had with BCP Future Places, and as has just been mentioned, the need to restore trust. And it was mentioned by Councillor Martin that people don't really have a great interest in these companies and the way they operate until something goes wrong, and it has a big cost to the public purse and to what we can do as a council for our residents. So that's when people suddenly become interested in how these operate, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we are satisfied with the governance to avoid that and avoid. So I think the best outcome would be that really people just aren't interested in what goes on because it just ticks along and it delivers what these companies deliver, what we need them to deliver for the residents of BCP. My only comment is on the governance self-assessment. I think Appendix 4 is in there, which primarily looks at the companies that are listed there about Future Places, Bournemouth Development, BDC, BBML and Seascape. Obviously, the overall report also references Tricuro, and as references been made to the executive shareholder group of Tricuro. Just a little reference on item 3, which talks about the review being carried out to ensure that they comply with the good governance by the end of March, and actions reported to Cabinet in July. Just in reference to Tricuro, obviously there's another agenda item coming next about the proposed change to the shareholding in that company. And with that going on and other changes at the moment, I don't have any. I'm sure there isn't an issue in terms of reviewing the sort of satisfactory governance of Tricuro, but I anticipate that changes will be being made over these coming next few months as a result of the next agenda item we're looking at. So just to note that against the backdrop of the reports and subsequent action plans coming forward, and I'm sure officers will be able to sort of look at that and prepare a response. But it's good to have this shareholder governance review at the time actually we're potentially looking at changes in the shareholding of Tricuro.
Thank you, Councillor Burton.
Yes, I mean, just coming back to the idea of directorships, I do agree Future Places has caused quite a lot of comments all over the place. I totally agree with Councillor Cox that keeping councillors off directorships, I think, is the best idea. Although I'm still wondering if there needs to be a possibility for a case when I can't think of an exact example now. I don't like the idea of banning something and saying it can't happen if there's a good reason. But one thing coming from this meeting, a lot of public assume that when you see the term director, they assume it's a paid role. We've just heard of all these councillors today who are directors of companies, and there are some members of the public will say, in that case, there's a lot of money being paid to councillors for this directorship. Now, I know this is not the case, but I've read on social media that is what a lot of people are saying. So I thought I'd bring it up in this meeting just in case anybody was listening and was assuming that we've just declared a lot of people with a lot of income, because that isn't the case, and that's not the reason that director isn't a paid role for councillors.
I'm really glad you clarified that. Right, Councillor Earl, and then we'll go find. Well, that was it then, wasn't it? That's everybody. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also really glad that you clarified that, Richard. It's very, I spend a lot of time explaining to people what a directorship is. But I did watch the overview and scrutiny meeting, and it was very interesting in terms of the debate. I think that from my point of view and what I would reflect on is that just over a year ago, we actually, or the Liberal Democrats and some of our partners brought forward a motion to council which was on cleaning up governance in BCP, and we had 4 asks in that, you know, on consultancy fees, governance review and that kind of thing. But one of the main ones was to look at the directorships and whether it's appropriate for cabinet members to also be directors because of that conflict of interest. So here we are a year down the line, and I think a lot of learning from that was from Future Places and some of our other companies, and this is really a chance to start afresh of how cabinet relate to those outside companies, and doesn't cause those questionable those questions really in why we are actually directors in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Hannah for any summing up and then to the vote.
Thank you, Leader. It's also a response to some of the points that have been made. Going back to Councillor Bartlett's comments about commissioning and his concerns about the fact that that may not have been done as well as it might have in the past. Just to confirm that commissioning will be through Cabinet, it will be through an annual business plan, and there will be the opportunity for scrutiny to scrutinise those prior to the Cabinet meetings and to comment on them. So I hope that that will be reassuring. His comments about members on boards, there's been further discussion amongst Cabinet about that. But just to add to that discussion that there are potential issues in terms of potential conflict of interest between the council's aims and objectives and the company's aims and objectives. So there are issues there, and there's an issue in relation to confidentiality and what can be shared in what way, by whom, to whom. That doesn't mean that there is a line totally through members on boards, and there have been comments that there might be cases where that would be appropriate, and that will emerge as part of the review that is proposed and the report that will come to Cabinet in July. A comment about the role of the Director of Resources. It is coincidental that I have emailed the Chief Executive last night, just raising that issue on a slightly wider basis. So it remains to be seen exactly how that is resolved, but I look forward to advice on that. Councillor Cox's comments about paragraph 4 and the word potential as distinct from the word importance. Just to clarify that this is suggesting that the cost benefits, the benefits to residents, accountability and transparency and avoidance of potential conflict are all important. What the proposal is saying is that we will be looking at the original reason for the company. We'll also be looking at alternative options for delivering the function currently performed by the company. And those two need to be compared and contrasted, taking into account all of those areas. So the word potential is there to say, through the company, there may be this type of potential for accountability and transparency. If there's an alternative option for delivering the service, what potential does it have for accountability and transparency? So it is looking at the potential in each case that is important. Accountability and transparency are important and will be taken into account, I suspect, just as fully as Councillor Cox would want. I think that's reassuring to him. The wording council control in paragraph 5 is not suggesting and was not intended to suggest, so apologies if there's any misunderstanding there, that the council should be controlling each of those organisations. It was raising the question to be considered at that time as to what the council is controlling. What in terms of the council's needs, objectives and aims, what control does it have? No, there's no attempt to take over those areas. In terms of immediate resignations from boards by directors, Ms. Perry has already indicated her response to that and her reassurance, but it was always my understanding that this decision today is deciding to hold the review. And it won't be until the review has taken place and recommendations have come to Cabinet that there will be any change in current arrangements. So for that reason as well, there is no need for anyone to resign, and let's hope that the companies continue to work as effectively as they have been doing. And the last comment is just to thank Councillor O'Brien for his comments about Tricuro and what the situation is there. Thank you for that. So with all of that, I continue to move. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. So we have a recommendation on the table, which is in 3 parts. The proposal is that the review of all the council companies will be completed by the end of the next financial year, 31st of March 2024, with the subsequent action plans reported in July 2024. So there is a timeline. With that, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we only have one substantive left, so I'm hoping we can go on through so that we don't go over time. If we can all hang on for a coffee. Item 14, Tricuro Local Authority Trading Company transfer of shares. This one is being proposed by Councillor Brown. Do we have a seconder on this one? Councillor Martin, thank you very much. So, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, in some ways this is a fairly straightforward report for Cabinet members, but an important one nonetheless. As the report explains, Tricuro are our local authority trading company providing adult and social care services across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. Both BCP Council and Dorset Council own shares in the company. Members, longer serving members will recall that the company was set up, I believe, in 2015 as a joint venture company between the then Dorset County Council, Bournemouth Borough Council and the Borough of Poole. And obviously there's been changes since BCP. So it's BCP Council and Dorset Council own shares in the company. Dorset Council withdrew their services in October 2022 and are willing to transfer their share in the company. Now, Tricuro, as members will be aware, deliver care services, sort of care homes. And actually the reason I was delayed arriving at this meeting was that I was visiting a Tricuro day centre, one of our day centres in Moordown this morning. So they operate a lot of our day centres and care provision for us and are commissioned to do that. Dorset have now set up their own local authority trading company within the Dorset Council area called Care Dorset, and so no longer using the services of Tricuro, and as I said, willing to transfer their share in the company. And so the report sets out the process and seeks our Cabinet approval for that share transfer that will leave BCP Council as the single shareholder. The transfer or allocation of Tricuro shares, I think it's important to note, is a reserved matter under the shareholder agreement and therefore requires Cabinet approval. And the result of this decision would be for BCP Council to be the single shareholder of Tricuro. And the recommendation before us is that Cabinet approve the transfer of Dorset Council share in Tricuro for the sum of £350,000. That sum, actually, in determining that value, it's covered in the report there. But obviously, as members, we have a duty to seek and follow professional advice that we're giving in these sorts of financial decisions. So an independent valuation of the assets and liabilities has been carried out by Arlene Close, which is contained in the confidential report. Obviously, if we want to discuss that, we'll have to go into a sort of confidential session because it's commercially sensitive. Officers support the negotiated share price of £350,000. And just to note that the payment would be from Tricuro from their distributable profits. There would be no need to use public funds, so we won't actually have to use any of our sort of reserves or general fund within BCP Council. This would be met from Tricuro's own internal funds. All the details are there in the report, so I'm happy to take any questions. And Mr. Hornsby is online as well. Should we have any more technical questions that I can't deal with?
Thank you. So this hasn't been to scrutiny, so I'm not going to go, and if it did, it would go to health scrutiny, I'm assuming. So I'm going to go first to Councillor Canavan, because I know he does have comment before I ask Councillor Bartlett if he wishes to speak just as a regular councillor. Councillor Canavan.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as you just pointed out, this hasn't been to health scrutiny. Indeed, since I've been chair of Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny, we haven't had any scrutiny of Tricuro in that time at all. And I should perhaps also say that I am a nominated member of the executive shareholder group of Tricura, and that group hasn't met either. I am very grateful to Mr. Hornsby for convening a rather hastily convened meeting last week to give us some background to the discussions that have taken place regarding this. That was really very helpful, so I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful to Councillor Brown for identifying the issues in relation to the governance of Tricura, which is going to be the subject of a separate review. My concern here is not with the transfer of share. I'm quite happy about that. My concern is what is going to be left with Tricura, and what is going to be the impact of all of that on the services which we are commissioning it to deliver on our behalf. As Councillor Brown said, that Dorset have already pulled out of this operation. We have a daycare opportunities consultation, and whatever the outcome of that is going to be, there will be an impact on the services that Tricura are delivering, and an impact on that company, and therefore an impact on BCP as the sole shareholder. So Councillor Brown's identified there's a slight question mark over the timescales of the review, but I think the review is really important. So the assurance about scrutiny from Councillor Hannah in the previous item is really welcome, and the assurance that there is going to be an opportunity for us to consider potential options, different options for the delivery is also important, because there is no secret, and I have made this point to anybody who's been prepared to listen to me, that the operations of Tricura need to be brought back in-house with BCP, and I think everything that is going on at the moment just reinforces my view that that is the right step to take. So I'm just flagging up concerns about all of this in relation to the operation of the company in terms of the service it delivers for our residents, and hopefully that we'll be able to steer it through a steady path to ensure that none of this impacts too greatly on our residents. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Bartlett, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, please, Leader. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm also a member of the ESG, Tricura ESG, and Patrick's absolutely right. We haven't had a meeting for quite some time, and my understanding that was because of the legal work that was going on behind the scenes for the separation process. But I also appreciate the brief that we got from Phil Hornsby the other day on the matter. All I would say is that we've agreed to review the way that the services are going to be delivered and the future of our companies. I wouldn't wish to preempt the evaluation on Tricura particularly, because Tricura, from my perspective, seems to be operating well, and it was a great surprise to me when Dorset decided to pull out, and the reasons for that never really became clear, because dividends were actually fed back through that company back to both Dorset and to BCP, there was good oversight of the company's operations, but I think. I disagree with Patrick. I wouldn't, it seems to be a matter of principle here rather than the way the company's, because I don't think there's been any complaints about the way that company's been operating. I may be wrong, maybe I'm misinformed, but my overall impression is it's actually operating particularly well. So I wouldn't want to preempt the evaluation. That's all I would say, and I keep an open mind on what the council wishes to do with it in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I think we've made it very clear there is going to be a review, and I agree with you. Whilst we know that the view of Councillor Canavan and a number of his colleagues is that this company should be in-house, that should be an evidence-based approach, and therefore we need to go through a process on that. I just want to make reference to something that Councillor Canavan said. If Councillor Canavan is the chair of Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, it is in his gift to decide what he wishes to scrutinise. So if it hasn't come to scrutiny, I would encourage him to add it to his board plan. I know that he's a new chair of scrutiny, but as Councillor Bartlett will say, scrutiny decides what scrutiny scrutinises, and therefore, if it hasn't come to scrutiny, I don't think we can blame the portfolio holder. Although, obviously, if a paper is coming to Cabinet, that is often the catalyst for a committee choosing to scrutinise. But please do feel free to ask to scrutinise whatever you like in the remit of your committee. Anybody in Cabinet wishing to discuss this one? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just a couple of things. Firstly, obviously, Dorset Council withdrew from the arrangement in October 22, as we heard, and as we heard from Steve Bartlett, it was a bit of a surprise that they felt that was a good thing to do, but that's their choice. But I wonder what assets or capability they took with them, because they've clearly set up a separate organisation to do that, and whether the sum that we're looking at paying them in addition is net of that, because presumably they took assets that we had our share in as well. So, you know, is the reckoning right? And I accept we have to take professional guidance on that. The second was around liabilities, and I'm very conscious our new monitoring officer comes from Birmingham, where, of course, they've got a significant issue around the financial implications of previous decisions about pay and equality of pay, and just what reassurance we have that if there are historic issues to be addressed that come out of the woodwork, that Dorset there's some sort of means by which Dorset would honour their obligations there, or whether we're absolving them of that in separating. So clarity really about how unforeseen bits would cover. And then I guess the third bit was around Councillor Canavan's concerns. And there are areas where we know that the cost of care, particularly care for children's services, is extremely high, and whether there's a model where we should be looking to invest locally to make sure there is capacity for whether it's for adult services, for children's services, and whether Tricura might be the method for doing that. So I think there is something about making sure that it's a viable organisation going forwards, given that it is just BCP and not the shared service that we had. And some of that may be looking at how we can constrain some of our other very difficult costs within the council and use Tricura as the mechanism potentially for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. In which case, Councillor Brand, is there anything you want to add in your summing up before we move forward with this decision?
Yeah, I will just sum up, and actually, I'll ask Mr. Hornsby to come on in a moment, just on that last point from Councillor Hadley. But yeah, the review of the day opportunity strategy and day centres, as Ms. Councillor Canavan mentioned, will have an impact on Tricura, and yes, there has obviously been a big impact and changes within Tricura as a result of Dorset Council withdrawing from the company, and so yeah, there's a lot of changes have gone on within Tricura in the last year or so, and yeah, it's a good time to sort of look back and review and make sure that they are commissioned for what we need for our residents, and that it's the best way of offering that service. I don't have any reason to believe that it's not actually, and then that you can't deliver good value for money and great services. And I think it's really important to note that despite all the changes that have been going on within Tricura, the experience, skill and dedication of the staff and management within Tricura is unquestionable, and I've seen that from my own visits to some of their venues and to their day centres, particularly recently, that the services that they deliver for some of our most vulnerable residents are really really important and really critical, and they make a real tangible difference to the lives of so many people within Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. So it's really important that we get this right, and that we continue to deliver those really important services. Just as regards Councillor Hadley's point about the liabilities and Dorset Council taking their fair share of any responsibility around liabilities, whether that be sort of equal pay or pension liabilities, I understand and I'm advised that was sort of all dealt with as part of the separation when Dorset have gone their own way. But I would ask Mr. Hornsby's online whether he might be able to add to that. He was obviously around and involved in that separation and when it took place in 2022, just to sort of clarify that point for you.
Phil, would you like to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, as one of the reasons it's taken us some time is agreeing the terms of the transfer agreement, which was mainly around the staff and then some smaller assets. The buildings were owned by Dorset Council that they have gone back into. They haven't moved. The staff transferred back to the new company that Dorset Council set up. The staff that remain within the BCP area services are our responsibility through Tricuro. So there are no outstanding liabilities. But on the point of historical liabilities, Councillor Hadley, so that if there was an issue that came up that was pre-October 2022, then both councils have joint responsibility as the shareholders of the company at that point in time. So it would be dealt with jointly by both councils as a joint responsibility. And depending on the individual or where that service was located, that would help determine who took the lead responsibility for that particular issue. It's more about the head office staff, so staff that were located in the head office, where it's the jointness, if you like, of it that would take that more joint liability approach. I don't know if that's clear or whether I've just confused you more.
Councillor Hadley?
Thank you. No, that's very helpful. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? If not, we will go straight to the vote and move this forward. So it's recommended that we approve the transfer of the share for the sum of £350,000. This is a cabinet decision, so it doesn't go any further and will take immediate effect. So all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That takes us to agenda item 15, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Exec in accordance with the Constitution. Mr. Farrant.
Haven't taken any since the last cabinet meeting.
Haven't taken any, you had been Christmas, so maybe. Excellent, that's a quick one. Yeah, we might actually be on time. Cabinet Forward Plan, agenda item 16. I know Councillor Bartlett wants to speak on this. Just to say, it was published very late last night, so I've had a chance to have a quick look through it, and there's an awful lot more that's coming on board. So we're beginning to populate a longer time frame. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I noticed it was published at just gone midnight last night, I think it was.
Sarah's a hero.
Yeah. Now, for the last 2 years or more, there's been an item on the Cabinet Forward Plan regarding pay and reward, new terms and conditions of employment. And the purpose of the report was to seek approval for the Council's new terms and conditions of employment, including the new pay and grading system. That's been on there for about 2 years. In the revision published last night, that's disappeared. So does that imply that there's no longer any intent for the Cabinet to approve the new pay structure? Or is this just an error in the publication of the forward plan? Thank you.
Councillor Bartlett, with the greatest of respect, bearing in mind that Sarah published it at a couple of minutes before midnight, we hopefully didn't read this before we went to bed because we were focusing on this morning's papers. The Chief Exec has just said to me, it's my fault. I'm going to pass to him. I'm going to pass the buck and get him to tell us what's going on. If that's okay with you, because we've been sat here since early morning.
Thank you, Lydia. Yes, it's actually following a conversation with Councillor Bartlett, we identified there was a very long-standing, old and badly worded item on the forward plan. So we took that wording off. We will be looking at whether we need to bring a report to the Cabinet or Council to agree pay and reward or what the structures are. So we'll look at that, and if appropriate, we'll put it back onto the forward plan. I'm happy to keep Councillor Bartlett advised of that because I know it's an issue he's been looking at. But if I tell you the item on the forward plan was referring to it being brought forward by Lucy Eldred, who left the council as head of HR about 2 years ago, you'll understand why it was an old item that just been carried forward. So that's my fault that we haven't yet got an answer from Councillor Bartlett.
Councillor Bartlett, does that give you some reassurance?
No, it doesn't really, Leader, given where we are with the pay and reward strategy and the offer having been made to unions, which is going to a ballot on the 16th of January. One would have imagined the Cabinet would have approved this before it went to ballot, which they haven't. So I will, having seen its removal from the corporate plan, I will speak to the overview and scrutiny panel committee with a view to getting a report commissioned for scrutiny.
The chief exec said that's fine. You're perfectly entitled to do that. I suppose there is that it's that separation of member officer roles that we need to be very mindful of. Traditionally, this cabinet, traditionally, I'm not saying that's where it should be going forward, takes papers that are for the decision of the cabinet, not for noting. And there is for information, that there is an argument that says there are some things that perhaps we should bring through the democratic process that for which we don't hold the responsibility, but which we want to air thoughts on so that officers can hear them. That's a moot point about whether, you know, that is the role of the democratic process of scrutiny and cabinet, which we can obviously discuss. And perhaps that's something you might want to raise when we have our meeting about how the council member function works, when we have our workshop, which was scheduled for the 1st of February, but is going to have to be moved because Graham and I have managed to secure a meeting with the Secretary of State, Michael Gove, that afternoon in London. So that needs to be moved, but it might be worth flagging there because I do think there are a number of issues which are perhaps officer, paid service matters, which the water can get a bit muddied. And given the governance paper we had earlier, I think it's really important that we know what our role is, officers know what their role is, and that member officer relations and decision making is clarified. You may have a different view, Councillor Bartlett. I can see from your face that you probably do, but I think this is the forward plan, which is here to note only. So I'm going to close it at that point, if that's okay. So with that, it is 12:46. I'm quite pleased. I'm only about a minute late. So I will close the meeting of Cabinet and wish you all a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.